I want you to take a second and just think about the imagery that comes to mind when you picture the Japanese emperor.
Right, yeah.
I mean, if you follow international news or history at all, you probably default to this very specific, polished scene.
Oh, absolutely. You picture a figure standing on a balcony, maybe behind bulletproof glass, offering that very practiced wave.
Exactly. A practiced wave to this massive sea of citizens waving flags. Or, maybe you picture those highly choreographed state dinners.
Yeah, sitting right alongside visiting presidents and prime ministers.
Right. We tend to treat the emperor's public life like the main stage of a grand theater production, focusing entirely on that visible diplomacy and the pageantry.
Well, it's a completely natural assumption to make, right? For the vast majority of the global public, the role of a modern monarch is entirely synonymous with that visibility.
Yeah, we equate their value with their public presence.
Exactly. Their diplomatic utility, essentially.
But, and this is what's so fascinating about today's deep dive, the sources we're looking at reveal that this public presence is largely just a ceremonial veneer.
It really is. It's just the tip of the iceberg.
Right. We're ignoring this massive load-bearing architecture that's operating completely in the dark behind the curtain. And to pull an image directly from the historical analyses and cultural commentary we've gathered, we're looking at pieces from Mainichi, Discover Japan, and Chi-Chi today. I want you to imagine this setting.
It's quite a stark contrast.
It really is. So it's 5:30 a.m. on New Year's Day. The temperature is freezing, usually hovering right near zero. And the emperor is sitting in an open-air structure, completely alone in pitch-black darkness.
No press cool.
None. There are no crowds, just a solitary figure enduring the freezing cold.
And that image, I mean, it strips away all the modern assumptions we have about monarchs.
It really does.
It represents a profound reality that remains almost entirely unexamined outside of a very specific circle of scholars and palace insiders.
Which is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We are going to unpack the true hidden core of the Japanese emperor system.
A system that's been around for over 2 millennia.
2,000 years. And a tradition that, surprisingly, is not fundamentally rooted in political maneuvering or military dominance or wealth.
No, not at all.
It's anchored in this intense, hidden, and incredibly demanding concept of selfless prayer. And I want to jump right into the mechanics of this because the physical reality of what happens in that dark courtyard fundamentally changes how we understand the whole institution.
It really reframes everything.
So what is actually taking place at 5:30 a.m.?
Well, to understand the mechanics of that morning, we have to examine a broader category of duties known as a kyuchu saishi.
Okay, kyuchu saishi.
Right, which roughly translates to the court rituals. While the media tracking the emperor's daily schedule will, extensively cover a 20-minute ribbon-cutting ceremony.
Or a tree planting.
Exactly. Historically and practically, his primary duty, really the core of his existence, is the execution of these ancient rituals. And the specific New Year's Day ritual you just mentioned, that one is called the Saitansai.
Okay, Seitansai. I was reading through the breakdown of this in our sources, and the sheer physical asceticism involved is just striking. It's not just about showing up early.
Oh, not at all. The preparation begins long before dawn. First, the emperor has to undergo a rigorous purification process.
Right.
And once purified, he dresses in this ancient, pure silk attire. And as you noted about the temperature.
Silk in the dead of January.
Yeah, it offers virtually no insulation against the cold. He then walks out to a specific courtyard to enter a simple, open-air pavilion.
And it's basically just a roof with pillars, right? No walls.
No walls to block the winter wind whatsoever. And there, entirely out of sight of the public, he performs a ritual praying to the 4 directions, paying deep respect to the kami, the ancestral deities, and the imperial ancestors.
It seems like the physical discomfort isn't just, an unfortunate byproduct of an old building. It almost feels like a feature of the ritual itself.
It is deeply integrated into the act.
And the New Year is just one instance. The sources go into detail regarding another ritual, the Daiosai, which sounds like it pushes this physical endurance to an entirely different extreme.
Oh, absolutely. The Daiosai is the central defining ritual of a new emperor's accession to the throne.
It's the big one.
Yeah, you can conceptualize it as the ultimate foundational harvest festival. The new emperor offers sacred food to the kami and then partakes of it himself in communion with them.
But the physical toll required to execute this is staggering.
It is. The ritual demands that he pray continuously through the night, often continuing well past 3:00 a.m.
And he's maintaining a formal, rigid, kneeling posture for that entire duration.
Exactly.
The notes from the sources mention that before the Diosai even takes place, an emperor has to undergo intense, prolonged physical training just to condition his body to endure the sheer physical agony of kneeling motionless for those hours.
Yes, the physical endurance is intrinsically tied to the spiritual weight of the act,
Wow.
but the isolation of it brings us to a really fascinating historical paradox.
Right, and this is exactly what I was trying to reconcile when reading the history. Following World War II, during the Allied occupation, the General Headquarters, the GHQ, issued what was known as the Shinto Directive.
A very pivotal moment.
Yeah, because this mandated a strict legal separation of Shinto from the state. So suddenly, the state could no longer officially sponsor, mandate, or fund these religious rituals.
Right, they were legally reclassified as the emperor's, quote, private family acts.
Exactly. Private family acts. So if the state legally cuts ties with these rituals, basically stripping away any constitutional mandate, the motivation to endure that freezing cold completely changes.
It does.
It's no longer a job requirement. So I guess as a listener, you'd wonder, why continue to subject himself to such grueling physical extremes in secret? If it's just a private hobby, legally speaking.
Well, that shift in legal status is arguably what revealed the true nature of the institution. Because these vital prayers were legally pushed into the realm of private religious affairs, they basically vanished from mainstream media reporting.
Right, the press just stopped covering them.
Yeah. In fact, many of Japan's national holidays were actually stripped of their original spiritual names during this period to comply with the separation.
Oh, really?
Yes. For example, a holiday celebrating the first emperor's accession was genericized to National Foundation Day. But here's the crucial part. Rather than diminishing the rituals, the mandated secrecy actually deepened their solemnity.
Because it strips away any possibility that this is just a public relations exercise.
Precisely. In Japanese culture, there is a concept called gekimu.
Dekimu.
Yeah, it means punishing, grueling work. The fact that the emperor actively chooses to endure this gekimu in total silence, without an audience, and without the ability to use it for political capital, proves its authenticity.
It is the ultimate rejection of performative leadership. That reframes the entire concept of the role. If the secrecy and the physical agony guarantee the authenticity of the prayer, we have to look closely at the actual substance of that prayer. When he is kneeling in that freezing pavilion, who is he communicating with and what is he actually asking for?
Well, he's communicating with the kami,
Right.
which includes the highest ancestral deities like the sun goddess, Amaterasu. But the substance of the prayer is what truly separates this from how most of us conceptualize praying.
Right, because when the average person prays, even with the absolute best intentions, there is usually an element of personal petition.
Almost always.
We ask for our family's health, or success in a difficult endeavor, or safety during a trip. It's naturally self-centric.
We want to improve our immediate conditions.
Exactly. If I am asking the universe for a favor, it usually involves my own life or the lives of my close friends.
But the emperor's prayer, by strict tradition, is completely devoid of the self. Yes, completely. He does not pray for his own health, his own longevity, or even the prosperity of his immediate household. He prays exclusively for the nation's peace, the happiness of the people, and rich harvests.
And historically, rich harvests meant the survival of everyone.
Exactly, the survival and prosperity of the populace. And by extension, this includes a prayer for the peace of all humanity.
That is heavy. And I want to highlight a specific detail from the sources that captures the emotional weight of this selflessness. Empress Michiko, the wife of the Emperor Emeritus, once composed a poem reflecting on the Setansai.
It's a beautiful piece of poetry.
It really is. She wrote about standing alone, looking up at the moon in the early dark hours of New Year's morning. Because the ritual requires the emperor to be entirely isolated, she couldn't physically be with him in the courtyard.
Right, he has to be alone.
So instead, she watched the moon, consciously breathing in sync with him, trying to offer emotional support from a distance while he walked out into the freezing woods to bear that burden.
It is a profoundly lonely image, and it perfectly illustrates the emperor's designated role as the ultimate Nakatori Mochi.
Nakatori Mochi, the intermediary.
Yes, the bridge. In this framework, the emperor serves as the crucial tether between the unseen world of the kami and the visible world of the people. The grueling physical prayer is the mechanism that keeps that bridge intact.
It reminds me of the unseen architecture analogy we discussed earlier. Like, a regular person's prayer is like adjusting the furniture inside a house to make it more comfortable for themselves.
I like that analogy.
But the emperor's prayer is the act of standing in the basement, holding up the load-bearing structural pillars so that the house itself doesn't collapse.
Exactly, allowing everyone else inside to sleep peacefully.
He is literally bearing the structural weight.
That is a highly accurate way to conceptualize the dynamic. He is the structural support.
But tracing this back to the psychological driver, we established that the GHQ directive removed the legal obligation.
Right, it's not a legal duty anymore.
So if this isn't mandated by modern constitutional law, where does the internal mandate come from? Why volunteer to be the structural pillar? I was looking at the notes on the drafting of the Meiji Constitution in the late 19th century, specifically the work of Kawashi Inoue.
Yes, Kawashi Inoue. His role is fascinating here.
Right, because he was tasked with writing Article 1, which essentially had to define the philosophical foundation of the nation, and his choice of terminology is just fascinating.
Inoue's drafting process is really the key to understanding the entire system. He was a brilliant legal mind, and he struggled deeply to find the exact terminology that would define the emperor's relationship to the state.
Without leaning into Western concepts of, like, absolute tyrannical monarchy.
Exactly. He wanted to avoid that completely. So he pored over ancient myths and historical records, eventually returning to the Kojiki, which is Japan's oldest historical text. And from there, he resurrected an ancient pivotal word, shirasu.
Shirasu. And from what I understand, shirasu doesn't mean to rule in a conventional top-down sense, does it? It seems to be a much more cognitive or empathetic term.
You've hit on the crucial distinction. Shirasu roughly translates to know, utilized as a highly respectful imperative.
Oh, no.
Yes, in the foundational myths, when the sun goddess sent her descendant down to earth, she deliberately did not command him to govern the people or rule them through force.
She didn't say, go be their king.
Right, the divine command was to shirasu the country, to profoundly deeply know the land and the people who live on it.
So the fundamental duty isn't administration, it's comprehension.
Precisely. And this is where the motivation for the prayer becomes so clear. Because the emperor's primary mandate is to know the people, to intimately understand their joys, their sorrows, and their struggles.
Yeah.
The grueling prayer is not an artificial bureaucratic duty. It is the natural, spontaneous, emotional response to possessing that knowledge.
That makes perfect psychological sense, actually. Think about how empathy works on a micro level. Imagine you're watching a documentary about an athlete competing in a sport you usually don't care about at all.
Right, you have no stakes in it.
Exactly. Initially, you have no emotional investment in whether they win or lose. But the documentary painstakingly details their backstory. You see the injuries they've rehabbed, the financial ruin their family risked to support them, the sheer emotional exhaustion they carry.
You get fully invested.
Yes. Suddenly, you know their struggle. And the moment you truly know it, your reaction is spontaneous. You find yourself pacing the room, hoping, practically praying for them to succeed. The knowledge generates the empathy, and the empathy forces the prayer.
That is the exact mechanism of shirasu operating on a macro national scale.
Wow.
You cannot genuinely comprehend the suffering or hopes of a population without feeling a profound compulsion to alleviate that suffering or support those hopes. The mandate to know the people ensures that the freezing prayers at 5:30 a.m. are driven by an agonizing empathy.
Rather than just checking a box on a ceremonial schedule.
Exactly. It's real.
Logistically, though, I have to challenge how this works in practice.
Sure.
We are talking about a man who lives in a highly guarded, moated palace surrounded by chamberlains and aides. How does someone in that remarkably insulated environment actually acquire the granular, raw knowledge of millions of citizens required to trigger the empathy of shirasu?
It is a very valid logistical question, and the system actually has built-in mechanisms to bridge that gap. The sources highlight the emperor's protocol surrounding natural disasters as a prime example of this.
Okay, natural disasters.
Right, because Japan is geographically vulnerable to devastating earthquakes, tsunamis, and typhoons. When a disaster strikes, the emperor doesn't just receive a sanitized high-level summary of the damage.
He doesn't just read a bulleted memo.
No, not at all. He demands intensely specific, hyper-granular details from his aides before he will even offer prayers for a region.
He wants to know the realities on the ground, not just the statistics.
Yes. He will ask his aides about a specific evacuation center. He'll say, what exactly are those 30 displaced individuals experiencing right now? Do they have blankets? What do they eat for dinner?
He wants to visualize them.
Exactly. He refuses to pray in abstract platitudes for a generalized recovery. He insists on knowing the immediate, uncomfortable reality of the victims so that his prayer is anchored in genuine empathy.
He is actively gathering the data required to fuel the shirasu.
Yes, and it extends far beyond times of tragedy, too. A really beautiful example of this is the Utakai Hajime, the annual New Year's poetry gathering.
See, I always assumed that was a super formal literary event for, like, scholars and elites.
It's actually remarkably democratic.
Yeah.
Every year, tens of thousands of regular citizens from across Japan and even abroad submit waka poetry to the palace.
Tens of thousands.
Yes, and the emperor reads an astonishing number of these submissions. And the poems that are selected and celebrated are rarely abstract, highbrow literature. They are intimate, slice-of-life moments.
Like what?
Well, one source cites a selected poem that simply described the feeling of a teacher looking out a classroom window.
Wow. A completely ordinary, mundane moment of daily life.
Exactly. By absorbing thousands of these small poetic snapshots, the emperor builds a composite emotional map of the nation. It provides him with a direct, unfiltered window into the quiet joys, the minor frustrations, and the subtle rhythms of his people's lives.
It's a highly effective traditional mechanism for achieving shirasu.
It really is.
It is essentially utilizing poetry as a massive data set for national empathy. And the relationship isn't a one-way street either, is it?
No, not at all.
Because if the emperor spends his life trying to know and pray for the people, the sources point out that the people's response is to reciprocate that prayer.
Yes.
Take the national anthem, Kimi ga Yo. I think a lot of people outside Japan mistakenly view it through the lens of Western militaristic anthems.
That is a very common misconception. Kimi ga Yo is not a march or a battle cry. It is an ancient, celebratory poem that functions as a collective prayer for the emperor's endurance.
A prayer for his endurance.
Right. The lyrics describe a tiny pebble gradually growing into a massive, moss-covered boulder over thousands of years. It is a poetic wish for his longevity and strength.
Wow.
And similarly, the traditional exclamation of Banzai, which is so often mistranslated or misunderstood as a war cry in Western media.
Yeah, you always see it portrayed that way.
Right, but it literally translates to wishing the emperor 10,000 years of life.
Looking at this from the outside, it completely subverts the standard assumptions of a monarchy. A conventional monarchy looks like the ultimate top-down power structure, a ruler dictating terms to the subjects below.
Right, a pyramid of power.
But what the sources reveal is that this 2,000-year-old system operates as a massive continuous feedback loop of empathy. The emperor takes on the physical and spiritual agony of praying for the people, and the people respond by collectively praying that he has the strength to continue bearing that weight.
That reciprocal empathy is the hidden architecture that has allowed the Japanese emperor system to survive for over 2 millennia.
It really is unique.
When you look at the broad sweep of history, empires built strictly on military conquest, vast wealth, or aggressive political subjugation, they eventually fracture and fall.
They always do.
But the Japanese system has endured because it rests on the quiet, invisible power of shirasu. It is an institution fundamentally defined by the willingness to bear the spiritual and emotional weight of others.
It leaves you with a really fascinating paradox to consider about the future of leadership. We live in an era where administrative tasks, policy analysis, and even complex decision-making are increasingly being offloaded to algorithms and artificial intelligence.
Oh, absolutely.
We're optimizing the governing part of society to be as automated as possible. It makes you wonder if the administrative mechanics of ruling are eventually handled by machines. Perhaps the ultimate human leadership role of the future won't involve making policy decisions at all.
That's a profound thought.
Perhaps the highest form of human leadership will look a lot more like the Japanese emperor, a role entirely stripped of political power, dedicated purely to the quiet, grueling, and profoundly necessary work of bearing the emotional weight of a nation. Next New Year's Day, when the rest of the world is sleeping off the celebrations, it is worth remembering that one solitary figure will step out into the freezing darkness, completely alone, simply to hold up the pillars for the rest of us.